What is up, my fellow writing addicts? I'm Marissa, and today we're talking about subplots. Now, for the few of you who might not know what a subplot is like the main plot, but shorter, kind of like a short story. It can revolve around the main protagonist, but it also can be a major character. Also, like the main plot, the character has to have goals, obstacles, and a resolution. It can't just go nowhere. So you might be wondering why subplots are important. You can have like a simpler story with just the main plot, but I think subplots are fun, and I think you're going to end up with one kind of no matter what happens, just maybe accidentally. Because they add variety, they add excitement for when the plot gets too slow, they add characterization so you get more depth to your story, they also add conflict that'll affect the main plot, and overall they also help the portrayal of a theme. So no matter what you do, it's going to hit some of those boxes, which really help just make your story seem bigger and more than it really is, which I think is fantastic. Now that we've discussed why subplots are important, now we're going to talk about what they should do. I know it said it earlier, but it is really important to repeat that, like a main plot, a character with a subplot has to have a goal, obstacles, and resolution within that subplot. They also should enhance the main story and not compete with it, as it would draw too much attention away from it. Subplots should add intrigue, complexity, and depth to the world and its characters for the story that you've attached it to, while also driving forward the main plot. Each new viewpoint creates a subplot of their own because that character has their own goals and own agenda that will feed back into the main plot. Subplots can also help moderate the pace of the story, especially for when the plot slows down, and it can help also drive the main plot forward. It's kind of like a nice helping hand kind of a thing. It's fantastic. If you're struggling to come up with a subplot, there are three main types. There's romantic, which is romance, obviously. Most books will have a romantic subplot somewhere, either with the main protagonist or with two side characters. And this adds tension to the book, the will they, won't they. The next type is conflict, which is also in a lot of books. It adds both depth and background, mainly to your characters, because most conflict will have some type of history that'll come up in the book, and it'll also add to your character's motivations. That way, when the characters feel more realistic, it makes your main plot seem more realistic. It also adds a lot of that, conflict that'll feed into your main plot. The next type is expository. And this shows the cause and effect of how something came to be in your world. Or it also can add a character's background. I guess an example of this would be if a character carried around like a locket with maybe like a young woman in it, let's say like maybe his daughter. The main character at the end would kind of get more background about why this character carries that locket around and who that woman means to him and what happened to her. Now that we've gone over the types of subplots, here are the ways that you can implement it. First up, we have the isolated chunk, or the story within the story. And this is when you take a whole chapter to talk about something that happened like in the past maybe. It's a separate story than the main story. And when you go to the next chapter, you return to the main plot. An example of this is in Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I apologize if I'm saying the name wrong. I'm always going to get names wrong. Fact of life. So you have Victor in the main plot line trying to get revenge on his past friend and roommate, Eli. And when it cuts to the past, which is where that subplot lies, you get the whole chapter of how they got their powers and what Eli did to incur Victor's wrath. I haven't read the book yet, but Haley tells me it's fantastic.
It is.
So next up is the parallel line. And of course, it runs parallel to the main plot you have. So it kind of looks like this for a little while. It'll eventually merge, but right now it runs back and forth. And you start out with your main plot and its characters and what they're about and what they're going to do, and then you switch over to your subplot, where you get to see this kind of symmetrical story happening, and you switch back and forth as evenly as you can to keep basically up to date on what's going on, because they should be running at the same time. And toward the end, they will converge, typically with conflict. And I guess the best example I can come up with right now is Venom. Sorry, I just watched it. Is you have Eddie's storyline and then you have Riot's storyline, and eventually they come to a head. So the next type is going to sound similar to parallel lines. It's called Swallowtail. And that is when you have alternating plot lines, typically 2 or 3. Don't have more than 3 because you'll confuse your readers, and you kind of switch through the different points of view. Now, eventually all these will converge at a joint point, kind of like when all 3 characters or two have the same kind of meeting point for business. Now, a good example of this is Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman, kind of when all the characters come together. I don't want to spoil anything because there's a lot of characters to keep track of, but if you've seen the show Stranger Things, that also does it excellently, where you have the multiple, like the kids, the teenagers, and the adults all come together to defeat the big bad. That's the joining point. But it doesn't have to be kind of at the end. It should be relatively there, but it doesn't have to be at the end like the parallel lines. Another type is what it's called the in and out, where essentially you kind of shuffle in the subplots as needed. They come in, they do their job, and then they typically leave. They still help push the main plot forward, but they're not as long as some of the others go. And you'll see this in books like Harry Potter, where a character will come in, do what they need to do, and then get out. And it's mainly to focus on the main cast and the few characters that shuffle in and out. The next type is called the bookend, where you save resolving the subplot until after the main plot has been resolved. So once all that is done, then you resolve your subplot. Now, I guess an optional thing of it, because it is called a bookend, and on a library you have two of them, your subplot could also start the book and then, of course, end the book. But for right now, I'm just talking about it ending the book. And one example of this is one of my favorite books, Moon Demon by Lynn Ewing. Again, I'm so sorry, Lynn. I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong. My bad. Where at the end, Vanessa, main character, has all this drama with her friends, and it's not till at the end that she realizes what all that kind of secrecy was for. I'm not going to spoil it. I suggest you go read the series. Fantastic. Now, the last type is called the bridge character, which obviously sets it apart because what do you mean bridge character? Now, what you do for this character, essentially, you look at like your main character, your main cast of characters, and you create the exact opposite. And they happen to be typically for like the bridge of two worlds. And it kind of helps get information, it kind of get a little bit of conflict. And if you can't think of a character, start with your two worlds and then create a character for kind of each. I think it'll help bridge the gap that way. An example of this is actually Romeo and Juliet, where even though it's not character, it's characters, their main plot is the tragedy of their love story, but the subplot is the conflict of their feuding houses. And it's through realizing that both their heirs are dead and that their conflict had caused this problem, gets them to realize that they need to overcome this issue. But without those two characters, that realization and the bridging of those two houses, though not, through marriage anymore, because that happened, is what happened at the end of the play. And that's all I have for you today, my lovelies. Please, in the comments below, please tell me what book had your favorite subplot and why. I'm super curious. And if you want to come visit me, you can come see me at Twitter at Writing Addicts or at Facebook, facebook.com/writingaddicts. And please be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!